In this video, I'm going to be painting this American flag with Inktense pencils and blocks. So let's get into it. To start this project, I taped off the edges, then added masking fluid to the edges of the flag. I waited for that to dry, then I used the wet on wet technique to add a subtle blue background to the flag. All you need to do for this technique is to add a flat wash of water to the area where you want this effect. And while the paper is still damp, you add the blue on top, causing the color to spread out evenly within the water. I waited for that to dry, then I took off the masking fluid. Then I lightened up the guidelines for the stripes with a kneaded eraser. If you are unfamiliar with a kneaded eraser, then feel free to check out this video that shows you how to use it. Then I added a light layer of red to these stripes. It's so light that it's practically pink, but I will darken it up later. Most times with Inktense or watercolor, it is easier to start lighter with colors and gradually darken them up, since it's a lot harder to lighten a color after you've gone too dark. Alright, now I'm moving on to the stars. For this, I'm using a negative painting technique, where instead of painting my subject directly, I instead paint around it, giving the impression of the subject. For this, I lightened up each star individually, and then painted blue around it. Now at this point, they don't look like stars, but they will later, once I've added in more contrast. Moving on, I painted the white stripes. Now this is often difficult for beginners, since for white, you hardly ever paint white. Rather, you need to paint the highlights and shadows within the white, just like any other color. So in this case, there was hardly any white used, but rather grays and blues as a reflection of the sky around the flag. Now, while I let that dry, I go back through and add another layer of blue around the stars to add more contrast to that area. Then I did the same for the stripes, mainly darkening up the shadows within each stripe with the same red I used earlier. However, this time it looks less pink since it's working with the layer underneath it, causing it to be darker. Now I refine all of the shadows with the Inktense pencils, starting with the red stripes, after they have dried. For this, I used a dark red for the shadows in the stripes, keeping in mind that anywhere I add the shadows would represent folds in the fabric, so I needed to watch the areas where there were different levels of tension in the fabric. Then I blended out the darkest areas with water. As that was drying, I added another layer of blue to the areas surrounding the stars. By the end of that, the red had dried, so I added another layer of red on top of it. Then I added a very light layer of red to darken up some of these shadows. Moving on, I added gray and blue to the hem of the flag. Next, I blended out the blue around the stars with a tiny brush and water. Then I added some blue to the shadows within the white stripes and blended them out with white. Then I darkened up the deepest shadows in the white stripes with gray and blue. Next, I added another layer of blue to darken up the shadows around the stars. Then I blended out those shadows before refining the stars with a white luminance colored pencil. Then I used that same white to soften out all of the stripes. Moving on, I redefined the shadows in each of the red stripes with dark red, before darkening up the shadows around the stars again. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to check out this other demonstration. Anyway, until next time, God bless.